If the New York Mets really hold an open competition at third base this spring training, which young player is the favorite to win the job? I'm going to break down all the options on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On MLB for $20 off your first purchase. Now, if we were to take the New York Mets at their word, right now their plan is to have Mark Vientos slide over and play first base in place of Pete Alonso. And third base is going to be an open competition between a lot of young players who have still yet to establish themselves in the big leagues. We're talking about Brett Baty, who's had the most big league experience. He's 25 years old now. You have Ronny Mauricio coming off a lost year due to a torn ACL. He'll be 24 years old in April. And then you have Luisangel Acuña, who will be 23 years old in March. He got a cup of coffee at the end of the season last year and absolutely thrived in place of an injured Francisco Lindor. But prior to that, he had a lackluster season in AAA where he really did struggle. So as you look at these three guys, none of them really goes into the season where you really are feeling great about the idea of them being an everyday player. This is going to be a competition that starts in spring training. And again, assuming the Mets don't make another move, likely extends throughout the first couple months of the season until one of these guys really pops and establishes themselves, if one of them does. Which of these three young players has the best opportunity to have a Mark Vientos-like star turn, where not only do they handle the position, they thrive at third base. They become a plus bat in the Mets lineup. I think if we're just talking about absolute ceiling, the player that might stand out the most at third base in particular is Ronny Mauricio. Ronny Mauricio is a prospect that we always hoped had five-tool potential. Shortstop prospect, not a third base, but only has 7 professional games at third base. 5 of them came when he was in the big leagues for that September call-up in 2023. 2 of them in AAA. But he has always played shortstop, and you imagine a shortstop can play all over the diamond, particularly in the infield. Ronny Mauricio is a prospect that I've had a love-hate relationship with. And honestly, probably more hate than love, just because the minor league numbers haven't always been there. It's a guy that chases a ton, swings at everything, or at least had swung at everything, but did finally put it together in 2023 and really had a great season in AAA. He hit 292. He got on base at a 346 clip. He slugged at a 506 clip. So his OPS was over 850. I would venture to say the only time in his career he's had an OPS over 850. Unless he had one in rookie ball or something that I don't recall of. But this is a guy that once he got up to high A, double A, triple A, he struggled for a long period of time. But in 2023, he figured it out. He hit 23 homers. He stole 24 bags in 116 games in AAA. Got that call up, hit a couple more homers, stole 7 bases. Overall, the OPS wasn't great. He was below 700. But you look at 142 games played between AAA and the big leagues. He had 25 homers and 31 stolen bases. He is the one guy of these three that gives you both power and speed. Although we still don't know how that knee is going to respond coming off the injury. But if he gets back to prior form, he does have the ability over a large sample to steal 30 bags if he got that much playing time. I think he has the potential, although I don't know if he'd actually get to it, to hit 25 home runs in the big leagues, maybe even push for 30 in his best possible season. He's never done that in the minor leagues. But still, you look at his last 3 seasons in the minors, 21, 22, and 23, Ronny Mauricio hit 20 home runs or more in each of those 3 seasons. So the pop is there. And if you watch him hit, I mean, he hit some of those home runs that, showcase that light tower power, those home runs that just come off his bat and wow you. I believe the 2 home runs he hit in the big leagues were monster shots, if I remember them correctly. Ronny Mauricio is the type of player, and I've talked about this on this show so many times, but it's still worth mentioning whenever we do break him down, because when I saw him in person back in 2022, I was really down on him as a prospect. And I went to Binghamton excited to see Francisco Alvarez and Brett Baty, and Ronny Mauricio stole the show because he's 6'3". He is extremely gifted athletically. And if you just lined up the Mets starting lineup next year, if there was 9 guys you put on the line, and you got Lindor on the line, you got Juan Soto on the line, but you don't know anything about baseball, and you just had somebody who doesn't know the game have to pick who's the best player, Ronny Mauricio looks the part, and he has that star swagger. He carries himself in a way where he believes he's going to be a stud. So that could work really well in New York. And you compare him to Brett Baty, I think Mauricio is a guy that might be able to shine under the lights better than Brett Baty has. I mean, certainly better than he has, but better than Baty could. I am concerned about that with Brett Baty. If you look at just raw power overall, I think these guys aren't separate as much as you might think. You might view Ronny Mauricio as having way more power than Brett Baty. Brett Baty, I think, pound for pound, if you're talking about producing high average exit velocities, I think Baty, I'd have to look at the numbers, but I imagine Baty has been better across his minor league career. Brett Baty has the ability to hit for the same high average that Mauricio has, but he also is better when it comes to his discipline. Ronny Mauricio, like I said, chases a lot. Baty, last year, if there's one thing he did well, he did increase that walk rate in the show, and he did cut that strikeout rate. But Ronny Mauricio is a guy that you can dream on a little bit, especially because you haven't seen it. Like, we're now going on more than 162 games of Brett Baty's big league career. We have seen him play enough where at this point, if he is the Mets starting third baseman, you might be hoping for league average production offensively and a good glove. And that could be a win. Ronny Mauricio, you still have that hope to dream on. But here's the thing. If we're talking about who's going to win this job, I put Ronny Mauricio last on the list of these 3 players. Just because he hasn't played in a year. And he still isn't full go right now, as we're about a month away from spring training starting. I think Ronny Mauricio needs some AAA time just to get his legs under him. I don't think it's good for Ronny Mauricio to be splitting time in the big leagues. I think he should be playing every day that his knee allows him to, and you should really give him a long runway in AAA. I'm not saying have him in AAA the entire season, but I think Ronny Mauricio could be this year's version of Mark Vientos, where Baty gets the job in spring training, or Acuña gets the job, or some combination of the two. And Ronny Mauricio is your everyday third baseman in AAA. You let him get experience at a position that he's never really played. You let him hit, first or second in that lineup and get a ton of at-bats. And then if what's going on in the big leagues isn't working for you, you get to the middle of May, maybe that's the time that you give Ronny Mauricio the keys and see what he can do with the job. I think that's the most likely outcome for Ronny Mauricio. But I also think if you ask me of these 3 players, who has the most exciting ability to pop in 2025 and be an above average starting third baseman, I might lean Mauricio, but that also could be more testament of my expectations for the ceiling of Baty and Acuña. And that's what we're going to talk about next. If those 2 guys really are at the heart of this competition in spring training, who deserves the job? We'll go through it in a little bit. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Select Quote. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the NBA Finals. The same goes for life. Having strategy like life insurance from Select Quote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. Select Quote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets Select Quote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage of up to $5 million with no medical exam required, and it's more affordable than you'd think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedon. Go to selectquote.com/lockedon today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedon. Select Quote. They shop, you save. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. I appreciate you all for helping us get to our next goal of 12,000 subscribers. Now we're pushing for 13. Appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. All right, so let's say we're rolling out Ronny Mauricio. Ronny Mauricio is the starting third baseman in Syracuse to open up the season with a chance to make it up at some point if these other two guys don't handle the job. Who do you like more, Brett Baty or Luisangel Acuña? The fan base right now, if I polled this, it's not even worth it because I would imagine 90% of the audience is in on Acuña. And maybe I will poll this. Maybe I will poll all three of these guys and see which one you think is going to be the better option for the Mets. When you compare these two players, let's start with the glove. I think that is the one positive about this situation for the Mets. Their defense will be improved at third base because both Brett Baty and Luisangel Acuña, I think, are upgrades defensively over Mark Vientos. Vientos did a great job last year. I'm still holding out hope that he will be the Mets third baseman because they acquire a better option at first. But he doesn't have much range. He's got a strong arm, but he's a limited third baseman. He can make the plays that are hit at him, but he's not going to wow you with the glove. Brett Baty showed last year the capabilities of being an above-average defensive third baseman at the big league level. Luisangel Acuña is a stellar defensive infielder. I think he could play a plus, shortstop in the big leagues. So to me, that says he could play above average at third base. I would say when you're talking about gloves, in some respects, Mauricio is the one I'm least confident about because he wasn't a standout defensive shortstop. He was a passable defensive shortstop that had a chance to maybe be better at second or third. Acuña, to me, is a much better defender than really either of these guys, but Baty at least has the experience at third base and has proven it at the big league level. Acuña hasn't really played third. I just think that he's the type of guy, similar to when we watched Louis Guillorme play third base, where Acuña would just figure it out. I think he'll be fine there. So defense, I'm not really questioning with either of these guys. What it's going to come down to is the bat. And Luisangel Acuña is riding high off of that 14-game sample at the end of the season where he hit 308, got on base at a 325 clip, and somehow slugged 641 because he popped 3 home runs out of nowhere. No one expected that. I think he had 7 all year in AAA, and he somehow hits 3 home runs in a 2-week sample size. And really, I think all 3 home runs might have came in the span of like a week. He was unbelievable at the end of the season filling in for Lindor. They probably don't make the playoffs and go on that run if not for Luisangel Acuña. Then he went into winter ball this year in Venezuela, hit 337, 419 on base, 495 slug, had 3 homers, 1 triple, 5 doubles in 31 games played, stole 18 bags on 19 attempts, scored 26 runs, and drove in 17. Unbelievable season. Now he takes the confidence from dominating winter ball and carries it into spring training. I really hope that he can keep hitting like this. Not that I expect him to hit 337. We hold that for Jose Iglesias. But can he hit 280 in the big leagues? I mean, that would be incredible. But I don't even think he has to be that good. To me, the biggest concern I have about Luisangel Acuña is the drop in his walk rate. Last year in AAA, he walked 5.5% of the time. In his minor league career before that, he had never finished a level with a walk rate under 9%. That's a big drop. He hit 258, 299 on base, 355 slug, OPS of 654, ranked 78th among 81 qualified hitters in the International League in AAA. So when you talk about guys that got a lot of volume in that league, he was one of the worst hitters overall. Only 7 home runs, 131 games played, stole 40 bags, but was still caught 14 times. It was not a good season. Now, it is miserable in Syracuse. If I had to tell you which stadium or which affiliate not to visit as a Mets fan, I would tell you Syracuse, because it is, I mean, I went in, I think it was April or May. So when I went, I mean, the weather was awful. It was cold. It was muggy and like misty. It was just gross. Ugh, not a fun experience being in Syracuse. Binghamton, awesome experience. Highly recommend that. And Brooklyn as well. I mean, who doesn't want to go to Coney Island and watch a baseball game? But when it comes to Acuña's struggles in AAA, you do have to wonder if the environment was part of it. Guys just always cold, playing these games that feel meaningless. And you are seeing an uptick in pitching. And the big difference between AA and AAA. AA, you might see the more talented pitchers, but you're also going to see some other guys that aren't quite on that level. There is a little bit more of a variance. But in AA, pitchers pitch to their strengths a little bit more. In AAA, you get a lot of, 4A guys up and down who really know how to pitch to your weaknesses. And I think that could have been part of why Acuña struggled so much. I don't know about Acuña. I really don't. Here's what I'm sure about, and I've talked about it on this show before. I think Luisangel Acuña, if nothing else, is going to be a fantastic bench piece for the New York Mets for a long time. A guy that can play second base, can play short, third, go out and play some center field, basically can play any position on the diamond. And when you have a starter that goes down for a month, Acuña can fill in, and if he's hot, he might actually have a great month. Like, I think that might be who Acuña is, but there is a world where he can get that average up. And if he does hit in the 280 to 290 range, and he is at least walking at a decent enough clip, he is going to get on base, and then he can leverage his best asset offensively, which is stealing bags. So I really don't know what to expect from Acuña this year. I love Acuña as the guy that wins the final bench spot if the Mets did sign Pete Alonso, where he's Lindor's backup shortstop, where he is a right-handed counter to Jeff McNeil at second base, where he could, spare Vientos a little bit at third, especially at the end of games, and he could go out there and start in center field some if he's really hitting well. And Jose Siri and Tyrone Taylor are not. Like, I get really excited about that role for Luisangel Acuña. I get less excited about him being the starting third baseman. I just don't know if that really is the best fit for him. But when it just comes to his offensive profile, if he got that walk rate up to 9%, he's more selective. He's getting on base. That could be a difference of 20, 30 points on his on base percentage. If you can get Acuña to the point where you're getting elite defense, he's maybe hitting for a little bit of a higher average, and he's getting on base so he can steal those bags. Even if he's not slugging at all, I think you'll have an above average player that'll put up a pretty high WAR total because of the defense and the speed. So I like Acuña's floor, maybe more than anyone of these three guys. I really do. Now, Brett Baty is a former top prospect that we really thought was going to be the final heir apparent, the first guy that figured out third base for the Mets since David Wright. Now, that could be Mark Vientos if the Mets don't move him to first base. And I think they finally have a bat at the position that they haven't had in pretty much a decade. So that's where this whole conversation, is a little bit frustrating, because Vientos is just the clear answer. If Vientos is your third baseman, I'm not worried about that position for the next 5 years. Yes, defensively, he needs to improve, but come on. Now we're year 3 of wondering if Baty can win a job in spring training. And look, when you compare his numbers to Acuña in AAA last year, it is clear who the more advanced hitter is right now. Baty hit 252, 349 on base, 508 slug. So he had that OPS over 850. Had 16 home runs in 62 games. But in the big leagues, he hit 229, 306 on base, 327 slug. So you look at the OPS, he was, at 633. That's dismal. 4 home runs, 16 RBIs in 50 games. But as I mentioned earlier, the walk rate did climb to 9.4%. So that showed you some pretty solid discipline. And the strikeout rate that was at 28% in 2023 dropped to 24.6%. Also, before he pulled his hamstring in the middle of April, Brett Baty was hitting 316 with a 371 on base in his first 16 games. He wasn't slugging much, 386 slug, but a 757 OPS. If you had me right now, sign a document that says you sign here, you get a 757 OPS from Brett Baty, I wouldn't even care how he got there. I would take that in a heartbeat. Whether it was being the guy that he was in the first 16 games of the season, high batting average, high on base, no slug, or if it was tapping into some more slug for the first time, but he's not getting on base at a high clip, I'd sign up for either outcome. If you told me a 750 OPS with above average defense, I'd take it. I would take it. But that was a small sample size. And then when he got the full sample size, the numbers obviously started to tail off. I would say right now, the favorite to win the job in spring training is Brett Baty because he's the furthest along in his career. He has the most big league experience, and he has won jobs in spring before. But is he best suited to perform under the lights? That, I think, so far, what we have learned about Brett Baty would suggest that he is not. And this is a guy that maybe needs a change of scenery. He might have to get traded to a small market team where there's not the pressure or not as much pressure, and maybe he thrives. But I am rooting for him. I hope Brett Baty proves all the doubters wrong. And if the Mets don't sign Pete Alonso, Brett Baty has a breakout season, and all of a sudden you're set at the corners. And those three guys that came up together, Alvarez, Baty, and Vientos, are all starting and thriving in the big leagues. I would hope nothing more than that. It's just hard to have confidence in it this far along into his career. I've always been a Baty truther, but at some point you can't ignore the truths that we've seen. And so we'll see. But I guess the other side of this is the Mets could carry both Baty and Acuña. It doesn't have to be an either or thing. And that's what I want to talk about to close the show. How I ultimately think this does pan out if the Mets don't bring in another bat. So we'll go through that in just a minute. Also, I got a dark horse for you. So got a lot to talk about to close out the show. First, though, a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, theater events near you. And Game Time Picks is their feature that'll make it easier to get tickets for your favorite live events, because they're going to filter out the fluff and show you only incredible deals on great seats. So you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. And when you are looking through those tickets, you can view your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. You can buy tickets in a matter of seconds. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. If you look at the Mets roster right now, an Alonso-less Mets are going to start Mark Vientos at first base. They got Jeff McNeil starting at second, Lindor at short, Nimmo in left, combination of Tyrone Taylor and Jose Siri in center, Juan Soto in right. Isn't that fun to say? Juan Soto in right. Let's not forget how awesome that is, people. I think we're losing sight of it right now with all the Pete Alonso drama. The Mets are still better. They got a top 5 player in baseball. And then you look at DH, you got Jesse Winker and Starling Marte, Francisco Alvarez and Luis Torrens behind the dish. Count them all up. That is 11 players. You're probably going to carry 13 pitchers. That's the max you can. So you likely have 2 spots up for grabs in spring training. And I think the most likely outcome is Brett Baty and Luisangel Acuña, assuming no one else is added here, are going to make this team. And then you got a timeshare at third base. You shield Brett Baty from left-handed pitching. Acuña starts those days. Acuña can move around a little bit too. So I'd imagine Brett Baty is your primary first baseman. Probably gets, let's say, 4 out of 6 starts a week, with the 2 times you see a lefty going to Acuña. Acuña gets those starts and maybe grabs a start or 2 from Jeff McNeil. McNeil either getting a day on the bench or sliding out to the outfield to get somebody else some rest. That's how I think the roster would function. Meanwhile, Ronny Mauricio is playing every day in AAA. And so if Baty's not hitting, you make that switch, and maybe Mauricio gets the call. If Acuña is not playing well in that super utility role, maybe Ronny Mauricio gets his shot there. So you do have some depth. I like that overall. You have a 1 out of 3 shot of having one of them pan out and becoming your everyday third baseman. Whoever plays the best gets the job. And you have ample opportunities early in the season when Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor and Brandon Nimmo and Mark Vientos, all those guys can be carrying the lineup in their early goings to try to figure out who is going to be the best bet. And the hope is by the time you get to the deadline, you have a clear answer if there is an internal solution, or if not, you're figuring out somebody you can trade for to plug that hole at third base. Or, I just can't see them actually. If they do roll Vientos at first, moving him back to third midseason, that's probably not going to happen. I think ideally at that point, they're just viewing Mark Vientos as the first baseman of the future instead of the third baseman of the future, and you find someone that's plug and play. But that's really how I see this season going if they don't re-sign Pete Alonso or sign Jurickson Profar and stick him at first base. Other than that, unless they get into the market on Alex Bregman, and Bregman seems still more dead set on getting the long-term deal that I don't think the Mets are willing to go to. There's some trade options that we're going to talk about this week, but this is really what you're looking at here. The only other alternative that the Mets have is our dark horse here. The dark horse that can go into spring training and win himself a job, and that is Jared Young. He's 29 years old, and he is the one infielder the Mets have signed to a major league deal this offseason. They signed Jesse Winker. They signed Juan Soto. They traded for Jose Siri. But they haven't had any other infielders brought in except for Jared Young. Now you're saying, wait a minute, a major league deal. What's up with that? Jared Young still has 2 options. So you can send him down, start him in Syracuse. You don't have to put him on the big league roster. He was a 15th round pick back in 2017 by the Cubs. 7 years in the minor leagues, would be 8, but 2020 there wasn't a season. You look at his numbers the last 2 years, though, this guy has raked. 2023, he hit .310 in AAA, .417 on base, .577 slug in 90 games, had 21 bombs in 90 games, 72 runs batted in. Walked at a 13.3% clip, only struck out at a 22.3% clip. Comes out to the show with the Cubs, played 16 games. He did leave the yard twice, so his slug was in the 450s, but he batted 186. It was a rough little stretch for him. Last year, he was in the Cardinals organization, 74 games played in AAA, hit .285, .411 on base, .506 slug, 11 home runs. Mid-season, he gets a call to go play in the KBO, and he signs to go over there. 38 games played, hit .326, .420 on base, .660 slug, 10 home runs, 16 doubles, and a triple. Absolutely dominated in the KBO. Gets a major league deal with the Mets. He has experience really all over the diamond because he's one of these sort of career minor leaguers that just has to play wherever they tell him to, and you never really have that set position, but has a lot of time in the corners, whether that's first base, third base, left, or right. So he does bring you some versatility. Jared Young has a chance here, and probably if the Mets don't sign Pete Alonso or anybody else, his best shot ever to win a job in spring training. And he's a vet compared to these other guys. He's 29 years old. Granted, limited big league experience. Brett Baty has way more big league experience. But Jared Young is not a guy to completely discount in all of this. Do I think that the Mets found their version of the Dodgers landing Justin Turner or Max Muncy? Probably not, but you never really know. A guy that has consistently over the last couple of years gotten on base at a 400 clip with a slugging percentage over 500 in AAA, It's someone that's worthwhile to take a shot at. Now, since I mentioned Jared Young, I know there's some diehard Mets fans that are going to ask me, why not mention Luke Ritter? Luke Ritter has put up some big numbers in AAA for the Mets. How about a guy that's homegrown? Why doesn't he get a shot? And I do think he theoretically should get an invite to spring training, a major league invite. But while he had 26 home runs and 134 games played last year and has driven in a ton, he has a strikeout problem. Throughout his minor league career, he has struck out over 30% pretty much every single stop he's had. And my thought or my assumption for why he hasn't gotten a big league opportunity is the Mets know there's some holes in his swing. Why I'd love for him to get a real look, my guess is he sees big league pitching, starts to get big league scouting reports, and they would just eat him alive. And he would strike out 35% of the time. Maybe he'd run into one here or there, but I just think he would be exposed at the big league level. Jared Young could as well. But Jared Young's numbers have been better in AAA than Luke Ritter's, especially when you're talking about the walk rate and the strikeout rate. Just better discipline. So we'll see. We'll see who ultimately gets the opportunities at third base this year. My prediction at this point, outside of an external addition, the Mets stay internal. My prediction is come opening day, you got a pseudo platoon at third base with Brett Baty and Luisangel Acuña, and Ronny Mauricio is the fallback option, waiting in the wings, getting everyday reps in AAA at third base, so that if either of those guys falter, he's the one you call up. Only problem with all that, if there's an injury to Jeff McNeil, I mean, you're really thin overall as a roster. So that would require the Mets to maybe go out, add some guys on minor league deals like they did with Jose Iglesias last year. I have a couple of those names for you guys on future shows this week as well. But for now, that's going to be all. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can follow me on social media at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league by hosts from each league, by Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.